Welcome to our anti-racist Capoeira speaker series. The purpose of this series is to archive and amplify the work being done in the Capoeira community that can hopefully give us a pathway forward to a more equitable future. Today we have with us Professor Malandro of Filosibimba in the California Bay Area. Their school preserves the cultural legacy of Mestre Bimba and the essence of Capoeira Regional. So, Professor Malandro, would you like to begin by telling us a bit about your background in Capoeira?
Sure. First, I wanted to start by just saying thank you for the opportunity. And it's a pleasure to be here. So my background in Capoeira, how far back we want to go?
From the beginning, let's start there.
Yeah.
Woo! Okay, 16 years old. No, I was always into martial arts. Once, I saw Bruce Lee, someone who was similar frame as mine, like very slender, throwing people everywhere, and I always wanted to do martial arts. Eventually, I came across a movie called Only the Strong, and that was like my first visual experience of Capoeira. And then later on, a video game called Tekken 3 with Eddie Gordo. And that was really cool because that was, a sense of actually controlling the person who's doing all these capoeira movements. So I would look to a lot of like black belt magazines and just read different articles. In the back of one of them, there was a California Brazil camp. And it advertised that there was capoeira. And at the time, I lived in Detroit with my mom and my sister. And my dad at the time was living in California, Los Angeles. So I thought that maybe I could go to this camp and try capoeira. Mind you, this would have been like my first class. So here I am thinking about going all the way, on the other side of the country to do my very first class in capoeira. So as I called from my mother's basement, because I figured if she didn't see me make the call, she wouldn't know I was calling.
Yeah.
And, someone picked up the phone. They asked me where I was calling from. I said Detroit. And they were like, oh, we have someone who teaches capoeira there. We'll send you all the information about the camp and the person who teaches. So I got the information and then eventually had a chance to have one of my friends give me a ride to class. And when I arrived, I was like, oh, this is awesome. So like I signed up for the class and I immediately went to like the front of the line because, I already, I had Only the Strong on like VHS, play Eddie Gordo a bunch of times. So I was like, okay, I know all these movements. And the people were there was like, hey, you have to go to like the second or third row, not the first, which was fun. And that was like my first official like capoeira class. And I just stuck with it until, today. Eventually, when I turned 19, I moved from Detroit to California, particularly just to train capoeira. And then I would visit Brazil annually. There was sometimes I went to Brazil twice in the same year, training really hard. Lived in Brazil for a year and trained with various mestres. And then that's in a nutshell up until today. And every now and then the last time I was in Brazil was, I believe it was 2018. When our school, Filosibimba Escola de Capoeira, celebrated 100 years of Capoeira Regional.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for charting for us the path where you began to Capoeira to where you are now. I know you've expressed that there's no way to separate your personal journey and your Capoeira journey. And I was wondering if maybe you wanted to add a bit about that, what that means to you.
Yes. My personal journey really, I think at a certain point, everyone wants this sense of belonging. And Capoeira definitely provided that sense of community. The people who were training definitely provided that sense of belonging and sense of community and camaraderie, which I'm very fortunate to have in the various places that I've trained and schools that I've visited, because of course, as humans treat other humans, sometimes we treat them well, sometimes we don't treat them as nice, depending on our own issues. So capoeira was always fun for me. But the main thing about like my journey was me as a Black man, as an African American, wanting to research my own roots of where I came from the continent of Africa. So that also seeped into, you know, the capoeira. At that time in my life, I was practicing generally what's called contemporâneo, which is a contemporary style. When I say style, it's easier term to use style, even though I prefer not to, but for now, say like that particular segment or lineage, okay? So it was a contemporânea capoeira that I was doing, which is just a mixture of elements of Angola. When I say elements, certain traditions that exist, some things in regional, and then, you know, other innovations pulled from either other schools in capoeira or from other dances, martial arts, things like that. So with doing contemporary capoeira or contemporânea, I was feeling like there wasn't really a base for me. There wasn't a reference for example, Angola and regional, because that's also what I was looking for in my life. So this was also one of the reasons that motivated me to move to Brazil, go to Bahia, which is the Mecca of capoeira, and seek out different mestres, seek out different schools to train directly from the source. And I'll try to minimize my use of that term, but it just hits, you know, every time. So to go directly to the source. So with Capoeira Angola, I trained at Mestre João Pequeno's Academy. While he was still alive, I trained with Mestre Jogos de Dentro, who is like one of the best examples of Mestre João Pequeno's work, and an amazing Capoeira mestre. Also with Mestre Cabello, and also with Grupo Fica in Bahia as well. And then with Capoeira Regional, went directly to the source, which is Mestre Nenel at the Fundação Mestre Bimba, and got my first real experience of Capoeira Regional. And let's see, with that experience, I saw that there was more similarities with Capoeira Angola and Regional than differences. To be frank, Angola and Regional had more similarities than they did with Contemporânea. There was a real strong like sense of foundation, of a method, a tradition, not tradition, a rigid tradition, but again, like a groundingness, like a reference. So the Rodas at Mestre Nenel's Academy were very soulful. And the reason why I bring that up is because what I was taught and the information that was put out there in books and documentaries was that Regional was the upright, fast, aggressive, and Angola was the slow, low, close to the floor. And just living in Bahia, there was no limitations or these what's the word I'm looking for? These stereotypes for these particular lineages. So, for example, at Mestre Nenel's Academy, they had Samba do Grande, which is, you know, a fast-paced rhythm, and then there were other rhythms like Idalina Compassada or Una, which are very medium pace. And then the singing was like very soulful. So people who were visiting the academy, just sitting on the bench, just watching, would be like rocking back and forth and then, you know, clapping, because it was very infectious. And I was like, man, this is what I feel like I want in my life of capoeira. So from there, I went back home to the States. I received like my contramestre cord in the Capoeira school that I was training with, Manjinga. And all the while I was trying to see how I can bring those very strong roots with me. So, in some of the classes, I would be like, okay, to this class, we're going to focus just on Capoeira Regional. And then this class, we're going to focus just on, Angola. And in this class, we can do more of the contemporary, mixture of everything. And then it got to the point to where I decided like the best thing for me to do would be to do my own work in Capoeira. So I started my own school with the name Manjinga de Escravos, which was the witchcraft of the slaves. And that comes from a very famous quote about Capoeira from Mestre Pastinha. So I took that idea that, Capoeira is the witchcraft of the slaves, meaning how you deal with these immeasurable, impossible odds to survive and to find happiness and to continue living and to continue to pass on your knowledge to the next generation so they can continue, even though it's a fight of resistance, but also find some sort of freedom, They can take my body, but they can't take my mind. So that was, the idea with that particular group. And then just later on, I decided after I actually injured myself, I tore my Achilles the day before Mestre Nanel was going to teach a workshop, a week-long workshops for me and my students. So I ended up just being on the sideline, just watching. And during that time, I got a chance to just interact with Mestre Nanel on a one-to-one basis, just rather than teacher-student, just person to person, man to man. And I realized that the work that he's doing of preserving and disseminating his father's work is something that spoke to me because, I was raised in a single parent household. My father wasn't in my life how I wanted him to be. So that feeling of carrying on your father's legacy is something that always kind of was there to motivate me to continue to do, even though it wasn't the opportunity to do that per se. Even though I look like my dad, and even though I have my dad's name, Ricky Lawson, you guys can Google him. He's a musician. But still having that lack of like guidance. So Mestre Nanel provided that for me. And also there was a strong feeling of family, Filhos de Bimba is like the children of Bimba. So just in the name of the school, it's already this family oriented, type of school, this family legacy. And this is where I've been up until today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal journey with us. I think the themes you've pointed out are universal to anyone in Capoeira, specifically being a Black person. I think I could totally relate, especially to the lineage and being someone that has ancestors from the transatlantic slave trade. I can relate to not having access to like my historical lineage information. So all of this that you shared is, quite deep and giving a bigger purpose to Capoeira as a tool in our lives to help us grow and feel that sense of belonging and filling certain gaps that we may have in our experience. So thank you so much for that. And also you touched on understanding the different schools of Capoeira, which was something we're grateful to hear about as well. So thanks for that. I'm just going to move on to ask about the Juneteenth event that you host. So Juneteenth is a significant date for many of us in the Black diaspora as descendants of those who survived enslavement and genocide. Juneteenth is sort of the day that's commemorated as the last day of like emancipation for everyone of the transatlantic slave trade. So Juneteenth, for the last 5 years or so, you've hosted a capoeira event in your community. And we were wondering if you could talk about the importance of commemorating Juneteenth through capoeira as it relates to preserving the roots of the art.
Yes. Again, going back to just my personal journey of researching the roots. Also, just to add, because I know I talked about my journey of capoeira, but also like my life journey. I did many DNA tests, and the one that I found that's really had a effect on me, that impacted me the most, was AfricanAncestry.com, where they pinpoint the modern day country rather than a percentage of here and there. So doing that particular test, because I've done others, but doing that particular test and having them say that I come from Nigeria with the Hausa people really gave me a sense of pride. Like, it's weird. Like, it felt like my legs had strength, you know, to stand up and be like, okay, this is now I have a choice if I want to research and visit and know more. Because before it was whatever anyone told you, and not having a choice really didn't. It just felt like, you know, a root, the tree without roots, so to speak. So along that journey, then I was educated. I don't want to say I discovered, but I was educated about Juneteenth, just because of the location in Emeryville where I teach capoeira, about a Juneteenth celebration. And in Berkeley, there's this celebration that has been going on for like over 20 years, and I never knew anything about it. So I was like, what the hell? So I read up more about it, and just, again, something just spoke to me about that whole thing of like this separation of Angola versus regional, or even these particular art forms versus contemporary, because you do a contemporary style, yours is not the true, mine is the more pure, so yours has less value. And I just wanted to get away from that. And since Juneteenth is a celebration, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to celebrate freedom. I wanted to celebrate community. And I reached out to a few friends from different capoeira lineages. One friend, at the time he was Professor. Now he's Mestre Shango from Cordal de Ouro, and also Professor Salim from Capoeira Angola through the lineage of Mestre João Grande. So here you have like these very direct lineages, and I just discussed with them like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to do a roda. Want to talk a little bit about the celebration of Juneteenth, just share the information that I personally learned. And we'll have a Angola setup, musical setup, and then after that we'll do a regional setup, and then after that we'll close with a contemporary setup. And it was very powerful. It was so successful. When I say successful, meaning like everyone who was there came away with a feeling of motivation to research the roots of their own school, of capoeira in general. The whole aspect of the celebration of Juneteenth was very, very powerful as well. We had a potluck afterwards, you know, so everyone got to just hang out and talk, which is very important, period, you know, for us to talk to each other and have the different discussions. So it just kept continuing, and I want to say growing with its efficiency and growing with its effect. So now I have Baba Chimba, who is a mestre of Capoeira Angola, because Professor Salim, he moved to Kenya. He moved his family to Kenya, and he's been living there, but also continuing his work of Capoeira Angola. So Baba Chimba is very, very important elder to have in the community, because to my knowledge, he was the first person to bring Capoeira Angola to California. Also, when Capoeira Angola was kind of dying out, he was a part of that resurgence. So Baba Chimba, Mestre Cobra Mansa, Mestre João Grande, and Mestre Moraes got together and did like touring, rodas, presentations, everything about Capoeira Angola. And that's why you see Capoeira Angola practice so much today, because of these Black men who got together, organized, and was very educated and knowledgeable about the art form, but also how to present it, its history, and also how to develop students as well. So, you know, to have him support my work and support my idea, because Juneteenth, that celebration is my celebration, my contribution to the community, it feels really good. And then also Mestre Shango, who's actually, we both started in Detroit. He started a year before me. He probably was the one that told me to go to the back of the line when I started, but who knows? And he also moved out to the Bay Area more or less a year before me. So I kind of like followed him. We were even roommates and trained together a lot as well. So it's good to have the elder, and then it's good to have the homie, you know, next to you as well. And then over time, I've called other people from other capoeira schools, Contramestre Omi, Professor Kaima, Contramestre, and those for Elegi Palmares, and then also Mestre Muito Tempo and Contramestre Versátil from Capoeira Batuque in Southern California. So yeah, when I say like it's been growing just with the support and with this impact as well, because just like me, there's some people like, man, I didn't even know about Juneteenth. And I was like, yes, I know, right? So it's been great. And that's how I feel also that it connects, because there is that resistance there to oppression. There is that desire for freedom. There is that desire to, in spite of, find some way to celebrate and keep your spirits high.
So I want to kind of actually lean into that with, you know, the celebration of resistance. But what we've kind of seen sometimes is that when you're not tuned into the history of capoeira, like some very, you know, nice narratives get perpetuated that don't actually like really hold up to the realities of what happened. And in some ways, if we don't honor the actual history, they can kind of perpetuate these falsehoods in ways that are actually harmful. I wanted to, and you know, if I do a watch party, this is going to be where all the angry reacts come in. We often hear about capoeira being a fight disguised as a dance. Can you address this in light of all the just a huge amount of research that you've done, and kind of contextualize that statement in your view, what you've done from your research?
Yeah. So I'm a capoeira nerd, right? So I read a lot of books on capoeira. And one of the books that I have is this book here, okay? Capoeira Jogo de Angola from Luanda to Cyberspace, Volume 1, okay? And reading this book, it says there's a part where there's just a timeline of different relevant events, right? So it says here that in 1830, Brazil imposes a criminal code banning drumming, batuque, dancing, shouting, and also enforcing curfews. And slavery didn't end until 1888. And then after that, in 1890, then capoeira was outlawed. So me personally, I don't advertise capoeira as a fight disguised as a dance, because it says that there was already many African expressions being outlawed or prohibited, so they would just be disguising it as something else that was already illegal. And I was speaking earlier today to a good friend of mine, Komi Komi, and we were talking about this particular thing, and feel like it's a very Western or European kind of idea of that this art form would be covered by dance and music, as if dance and music are something so much lesser value that to someone glancing at it would pay it no mind. You know, whereas the thing that I say when I advertise the history of capoeira is that it's because of its African roots that music and dance permeates everything of African culture. So they're not covering up the art form with something. That's how the art form is being expressed. The combat is expressed with rhythmic dance-like movements in a marriage of the rhythms. So there's not a separation, particularly in African culture. So that was a good thing that, you know, we discussed earlier today. And also what I want to point out is that, again, music and dance is a part of it, and it shouldn't be looked at as something that is negative or less than, to where that's going to cover it up so that it looks as if someone shouldn't pay attention to it. Oh, they're just dancing. Okay, that's not important. Let's continue on what we're doing. So yeah, capoeira is a rhythmic, African-rooted art form that manifested in Brazil.
And I believe the idea is that people thought that it was, or like the folks who enslaved Africans thought that it was a dance disguise, or it was a disguise, because they looked at it and did not know what was going on. So they inserted deceit where it was literally just their lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's
so much for that. I feel a lot better informed just around that saying it's a fight disguised as a dance. And as you were talking, I was thinking of how it almost romanticizes kind of the history of it a bit. So that was really great context. So just continuing to look at the history of slavery, and you referenced that book for us, which said in 1830, we have the banning of drumming, batuques, dancing, and shouting in Brazil. You talked about the enforcement of curfews, and also that slavery was outlawed in Brazil in 1888. Mm-hmm. Then 2 years later, capoeira is outlawed in 1890. So can you share with us, from your knowledge and research, what occurred between the time slavery ended and the criminalization of capoeira began?
Yeah. This is just from my own personal research. I'm not a historian, and a lot of the information is difficult to pinpoint exactly. But there are certain similarities with slavery of enslavement of African people in general, and once that enslavement was considered illegal, that there was no economic base for the now freed people, or even mentality for them to be welcomed into society. So the options, much like today, the resources were very, very limited. So here you have someone who is now, quote unquote, free, with nowhere to live, no way to make a living. So then the only options really was to go back and work for the person that was enslaving them and raping them and treating them like property. I recently watched, and I'll make a side note here, I recently listened to a podcast about the history of Zumbi. And in the podcast, it was saying that the life expectancy for enslaved Africans in Brazil was 10 to 15 years, the life expectancy. So that means you're worked until death. So just coming from that, and then knowing that now you're quote unquote free, you would not want to go back to that same person to work for less than nothing, or next to nothing, I should say. And then let's see, the other thing was that, you know, using their wits, which was like going to quote unquote a life of crime, and either robbing people just to feed your family or whatever, and also to become like bodyguards for politicians, or, you know, strong arm gang members, so to speak. And that was the only way that, or those were the limited, few of the limited options people had, the Africans had, in order to just survive and be treated as equal human beings. So that's how capoeira ended up becoming illegal, because of the violent gang activity of people who knew capoeira, but also, again, were not welcomed into society as like equal humans.
It's almost like there's a connection between that and mass incarceration today. I had to say that explicitly in case anyone just missed that. But I think that ties really well into this MLK quote. Says, it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his bootstraps, and many by the thousands and millions have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression, and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading. And, you know, the experience across the diaspora obviously has its variants, but there are definitely some through lines. And so, you know, you could very easily see how the experience you talked about of newly freed African enslaved people relates to what was going on in the US that created the circumstances that made that be a quote that MLK said. And so kind of when we look at this, like, we really can't ethically pretend that when it comes to resource distribution that we don't have these like huge inequities along racial lines, you know? Like when we look at slavery was 2 grandmothers ago. It wasn't actually that long. And when you look at how many people are able, even today, like in this pandemic time, oh, I moved back to my parents' house. Oh, it's nice that your parents had a house that's been in the family for 4 generations. Funny. That might be a thing that it's like, we can't pretend that folks don't have access to resources based on their race, but that's not like a full stop statement. It's like, okay, what do we do with that then? And I'm thinking specifically in the context of capoeira, how do we as capoeiristas that want to be actively anti-racist use, if we have privilege and resources, use those for the benefit of folks in the community that don't?
Yeah. How do we?
Yeah, the how question. I love how questions.
How? I believe like the same work that we should be doing if we were not in capoeira at all. And that's the work in the communities, holding government officials like accountable for the things that they say, or more so for the things that we as the people want. Taking, redistributing funds, for example, from the police and putting them into housing and healthcare and recreational activities. Like, these are more important. Like the police force does not need billions of dollars to do the jobs that people are calling them to do, which many of them are not qualified to do. And if you just look at the facts, like you can, in less time than it would take to become a police officer, you know, you would become a police officer in less time than it would if you were to become a technician, an engineer, or an electrician, or to be able to do someone's hair or nails, you know, which, or a massage therapist. That's like crazy to me. Like, you are with a weapon and a license to kill sooner than you could learn how to heal somebody with your hands. And that just blows my mind. So, for example, taking these unnecessary amount of funds that is being given to these people who are not necessarily being trained adequately to do their job, and then put them into things where there'll be less of a reason for them to be called in the first place, you know? And that's just a few things off the top of my head. But again, like the same work we should be doing, regardless if we're in the Capoeira community or not.
And there's something to be said too for people who have access to resources, like how they can leverage them for people in the Capoeira community, right?
Exactly. That's very important. It just like with any tribe or community or family that people are part of, like whatever you can bring to the table to contribute is like greatly appreciated, and should be opportunities that should be looked for. Like, how can I give back? Like, I'm receiving so much that's helping my life. What small way can I give back? Oh, I have access to, you know, I'm a grant writer. Okay, what can we do? You know, what sort of grants will help facilitate the work that we do? So there are underprivileged people of color or underprivileged kids, Black kids, whomever, that don't have the financial stability in their family to participate on a regular basis. Okay, well, I'm gonna write a grant to pay for the kids to be able to train, to pay for the kids' uniforms. That was also something that happened with me when I was training with Manjinga, is that this school got a grant for some kids to come and train. So they would take BART, which is our kind of like our public subway system, and then come to class. And it was really great. And a few of the kids, once that session, you know, was over, stuck around and continued training, and were quote unquote like my disciples, you know, would go everywhere. And it became like, I became like mentors to these kids. And that was just one example of just like opportunities that like have such a long lasting impact, you know? And what's really important is to see what resources you have and how you can contribute to improve the quote unquote problem. You know, first you have to establish what is the problem or what can be improved, and then what do you have available that can help improve that situation.
And even like mobilizing the Capoeira community too, like you were saying in the pre-interview about one of the activists who like took or mobilized like the Capoeira community itself for an event. Can you speak just a little bit on that?
Yes. So last Saturday, we as the Capoeira community in the Bay Area got together and did a Berimbau march. The inspiration from that was a march that happened in Los Angeles, where again they got together, marched to the city hall and did like public speaking. Excuse me. And then one of the organizers of the event, he himself is an activist. So because he's already has that knowledge, he's also a capoeirista. Then he decided to connect the two and organize the Capoeira community, which Capoeira itself was born out of the resistance and the desire for freedom. So there was a parallel, you know, connectivity, but the synergy, and the focus of that. So it was easy to get people rallied, and because of his know-how with activism and doing marches, it was very well organized, and not just like, okay, we're just gonna all walk in this direction, you know, at this particular time. So it was very, very inspirational. And he actually drove up from Los Angeles just to participate in our Berimbau march, you know, which was really great. And our Berimbau march was organized by Professor Shipa, also Mestre Itabora, and then, yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I've been thinking like the word in my brain this week has been solidarity. I've been thinking about solidarity within the Capoeira community. So you have kind of brought it up along lines of different groups in Capoeira, lines of geographical lines between LA and the Bay Area, And I want to kind of bring in this reality that, like, when we look at successful social movements, there's a pretty clear trend that movements tend to be most likely to succeed when they're able to build true solidarity, you know? And so I think about, how do we create that in the capoeira community? And like, it's very easy to look at the work of another instructor and disparage it if it's like not what you expect capoeira to be or anything like that. But you're very deliberate when you kind of create space with other instructors that are perhaps doing capoeira in a way that is appropriate for them, but may not be like rooted in the art's history. So can you kind of go through your methodology of starting those conversations when you see capoeira being kind of presented in what appears from your research to be a historical way? Mm-hmm. A historical, one word, not a.
No, if I understand the question, it's for me, what capoeira represents now, because it started out with it just being something really fun for me to do. It still is to this day. But now I totally understand of the role and responsibility that capoeira has presented for me. And I choose to put on my crown and step into that role. And when I say crown, it's not something of arrogance, but James Baldwin says, it's a quote from him that he says that our crowns are already bought and paid for. All we have to do is just put them on. So when I say crown, meaning that I accept this responsibility, I accept this role that I'm in, I accept that my decisions are going to impact, you know, my community, people who look like me, and even people who may not look like me, but also understand the work that I'm trying to do and want to support that. So it's very important for me to, you know, step into that role and be present 100% in that role. And I'm so grateful that I have a lot of support in doing that. Because I feel like I'm open and honest with myself, where I know what it is that I want to share with other people. I know that I understand that this art form is open for every ethnicity. And I say ethnicity, I don't say race. This is me particular, because we're all a part of the human race, okay? So I say, like, you know, regardless of the ethnicity, capoeira is open for everyone to practice, to contribute, to do it in whatever way they see fit. But it is important for people to respect the history and know that the people who suffered and what they went through in order for us to be able to do it now. You know, now that we have Zoom classes and, you know, I'm just gonna go outside and I'm gonna, you know, just do a little bit of capoeira by the tree, or do, you know, some play music with my friends with social distancing and things like that. We can now do that freely. Why? Because of these Africans and their descendants transmitted their ancestral movement from one generation to the next. And I get chills just saying that. But, you know, some of us really embody that. So when you really feel it in your soul, you want to transmit it to someone else. And not to say that anything is better or worse, but it's possible for people to try to recreate that as long as they understand where it comes from. And it's open for everyone to do whatever it is that they feel they want to do with it. I don't judge. At the end of the day, again, it's for me to be honest with myself with what is it that I want to do as far as contributing to it. So I'm not going to judge someone who might not focus so much on the history, because they may not know, you know. There's also another quote from Malcolm X. There was a point in time when you didn't know what you knew. So you always want to respect other people who are going through the same things that you are going through, because you didn't always have the information that you had. So knowing how that feels to not know, then all I can do is share the best way I can with these particular events, with these interviews that I'm so privileged and grateful to have, so that it may inspire someone, or at least they can hear the information and then they themselves can choose what they want to do with it. Just like with me, finding out that, you know, I have lineage in Nigeria. So now I have a choice if I want to follow up with that, if I want to learn any sort of greetings, if I want to research the food, or just like, okay, cool, now I know, and then that's it, you know?
No, I think that that's really beautiful. Oh, sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I am.
The Zoom delay, man, it's so real.
Yeah, it did delay for a second. No, but I was also thinking like, was there anything else a part of the question that maybe I didn't touch on?
No, that's it. I mean, I think that you kind of got the core of it, which is like when people know better, oftentimes they do better. I don't think that most people, when confronted with the history of capoeira, like when I think in my head about the difference between what it means to be part of a capoeira family, like what you experience in Bahia versus like a capoeira fit class, like I think that when people have the agency to choose, given all the information, it makes sense that more people would choose the one that feels like fills their soul more, you know? And I think that there is this idea of like, oh, we can force people. You can't really force people. You can just educate people and make information readily available and hope that people make the best choice that they will. And that's something I've like consistently seen with your teaching that I wanted to like bring out with the question. So that was kind of like the core of that one. But we are kind of coming to the end of the interview. I'm just like so grateful.
It's important. Sorry to jump in because I didn't want to lose this part. So, but I also think it's important to stick to your guns, meaning that it's okay for you and this is something I have to like let myself know as I was going through this process, that this is something that's important to me. This is something that I feel is important to the ancestry. So I'm going to go over this history. We're going to choose to sing these particular songs that paint the history of Africans in Brazil in a more positive light, rather than only singing about the Black people being enslaved or running and being beaten and things of that sort. There's a time and place for all of those aspects. But what I'm saying is that I choose to create the space that I choose to create, you know? So the information that I put out there is something that I choose. Now, my students or whoever happens to come into the space or receive the information, I have no say-so on what they do with it, how it makes them feel. But I, again, have to be consistent with my own work. And sometimes, you know, someone will hear the information and they could care less. You know, I had a conversation with someone many years ago about the whole thing about focusing on, you know, the history and stuff. And the other guy was like, you know, well, what if, you know, the other person just doesn't care about that? And then I was like, well, I'm most likely the wrong teacher for them, you know? Or it's just that, yes, some people will receive some things, but they lean a little bit more towards other stuff. And that's how human beings are. And it changes. So at this point in someone's life, or if they're a kid, teenager, adult, they may be a little bit closer to the physical aspect. They really enjoy training, you know, but you still highlight the history, the music, and things like that. Now, I don't care to support the idea of like, oh, when you get injured, then that's when you should focus on music. Okay?
Yeah. Hey now.
Although that's what happened to me, because that's the only thing that was available. You know, I've torn both Achilles in 2 separate occasions and had like just 6 months of just crutches. I was still teaching my classes of capoeira and gymnastics on crutches, which also helped me to become a better teacher as far as like analyzing and communicating the details without being able to demonstrate, right? But again, like putting value on everything. And if you have a genuine value, then other people will migrate towards those things, you know, regardless if they take it to the next level, regardless if they train super hard, they will understand the value of it. You know, how much they value is on them, but they'll understand like, you know, so-and-so knows that this is important and I understand why that's important. whether it's the history, the music, physical techniques. Because for me, I'm all for like being well-rounded. What tends to happen, because it just gets advertised that way, is the physical aspect, the YouTube videos, and nothing good or bad. It's just, it is what it is, you know. But there's also videos about the history and things like that. So again, just to stick to your guns, do what you feel is right. Do what you feel is like making your ancestors proud, even if you don't necessarily have any ancestry that may directly connect. Just knowing that you're doing something that many people suffered in order for you to be able to do, and then just being respectful of that. Just like if any family, you always want to respect your elders, you know, respect what they went through, so now you can go through whatever it is that you're going through.
I want to really like amplify, because I think that this is something that kind of in Western culture gets lost, is this idea of like sticking to your guns does not also mean like punishing and forcing other people against their will to do what you want them to do, right? So like you're very firm in your space of like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I am going to teach my classes. And this is like my space that I have created with this energy that can draw people in, right? You know, based on the merit of the space. And that's not like the same as like going to other places and like yelling at people like, you need to change this, change this, change this. That might not necessarily bring anybody into, you know, this larger community of folks. Tigaha, you got anything?
I don't have too much.
You can continue to think, but I also, just to piggyback on it, is that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You know, it's how you present certain information. And also I feel like that happens to be a little bit of like malandraging, you know. It's your, that aspect is disguising your intent, especially if you're trying to open the mind of somebody else. It's not to go in there and forcibly try to open, but to have a conversation so that you can understand where the other person is coming from, or at least their point of view, if it is kind of warped or distorted, so that you can better understand how to handle the situation, how you can give the situation a hastera. So if you know that this person is like super fast, then you understand, okay, now maybe the endurance level might not be so, you know, high. So maybe I have to wear down this other person with this conversation. And then, okay, now I present things nice and easy. So then you open people's minds. So again, going back to what I said, is like, it's being confident in what it is I want to present. So if I'm confident in myself, I don't have to argue aggressively, you know, with somebody else if I'm trying to just share a certain point of view or something that should be valued. That's all. I gave you some breathing time there.
So I was just going to say that I think depending on how a particular leader has a relationship with their students, I think that also affects change. So a leader may not necessarily enforce through, you know, a lot of words, but through their example, the way that they lead, folks can take up the example because they have respect for the person's actions. So that's kind of what I was thinking about, but thanks so much for what you shared.
Thank you.
We are now super over time, which is fine, but real quick, I'm gonna shoot some real quick questions at you. What are 3 favorite capoeira books for people who want to do their own education? Or just pick 3.
Okay, let me look on my thing. Because I have some favorite capoeira books, but I don't know the level of availability. So one is the Saga of Mestre Bimba, okay? And then the other one is called Capoeira. And then the other one is Mestre Nanel's book. So 2 seconds, I'm gonna grab, so this is like Mestre Nanel's book, okay? which I had a little hand in like translating to English. So it's in Portuguese and it's in Portuguese and English. Okay. What else? Oh, this one here was really good as I'm knocking stuff off my shelf here. This one, Capoeira. This one tends to be a little bit expensive. Oh man, the author is like super. Can you read that?
Yeah.
Got it. That's the author.
That one is I checked that out at the Toronto library, and it's not a book that you can even take out of the library. So
right.
It's a really important read.
Oh, yeah. And then the Saga of Master Bimba. And you see like all these little pieces of paper. These are like my bookmarks of like important stuff in there.
I appreciate that you're a true nerd, because it was like, hold on, let me just get the books. Let me just they're right here next to me. Let me go and get these. What are ways that people can follow and support your work?
Oh, cool. We are on Instagram, Capoeira Bay Area. We are on YouTube, Capoeira Bay Area. Facebook, Capoeira Bay Area. Or if you want to just go to our website, and then all those links are there, capoeirabayarea.com.
Hey, I appreciate the consistency. No room for confusion at all.
Yes,
and then last shout out for the series. If you want to support this series, all the instructors that participate in this are paid, and the more donations that we can get for it, the more instructors we can bring on. We have a GoFundMe that's linked in the comments. We also have YouTube. We have Facebook. We have Instagram that we just made. We are looking to populate that with content related in general to anti-oppression work in Capoeira, and kind of promote and amplify work that is being done in other spheres. So if you have anything that you would like to see on the page, please hit us up. It is Resiliencia y Resistencia on Facebook and on the Insta. I am going to flip those in my head until I get it right. But yeah, so please shout us out there. If there's something you would like to see promoted, please follow the page on all those platforms. It will be in the comments on here. And I think that that's all that we have for right now. I just want to reiterate, I'm so glad that you agreed to do this. Like, I really, really appreciate you coming on and doing this interview. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I learned so much every time I hear you speak. So it's an honor to be able to ask you questions.
My pleasure. I enjoy talking about it because it's motivation to continue the work. It's motivation to continue to research and find more information, so that, you know, you can continue to reach people. Yeah, so I'm feeling very fulfilled, you know, right now. And even sometimes I was talking, I was getting like goosebumps. I was like, man, oh, that's a nice shirt you got there. But you sit up a little bit. Yeah. Oh.
You want to show that shirt so bad. I'm so happy you got a chance to show it. She's been like trying to move the whole time. Be like, you can see it. Maybe they can see it.
It's true. It's true.
It's all good.
All right. Well, I will see you guys later then. Bye, y'all.
Bye.